Greetings, everybody. Nick DiVirgilio here in New York City, and I'm at the Good Hands Drum Shop, and this is Jess, owner of the shop. Thanks so much for having me here.
Yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure. Great to be here.
It's amazing to see an independent drum shop in the middle of New York City. So if you could tell the folks who don't know about your shop,
Sure.
How'd you get your start? I know you it stemmed off of working with Steve Maxwell
Correct.
back in the day, and he sold the shop to you. Give us your story.
Sure. I moved to New York City back in 2008 to open Steve Maxwell's second location.
Right.
His original location was in Chicago, which is where I was living and buying and selling and doing some things with Steve at that point. The opportunity came up to move to New York, and so we started this store together. I always lived here. Steve always lived in Chicago, so there was I had kind of a feeling of not an ownership, but a responsibility at an ownership level to keep things going and
Sure.
making sure that things were on point here in New York. And after moving down to this location in 2017, after being in Times Square for 10 years,
Wow.
we moved in here, and then of course we had the COVID situation. Things were difficult in New York, more difficult than normal, and I think it was an opportunity or a time for Steve to figure out what he wanted to do in Chicago, in Nashville with Forks and Craviato, and it was a natural progression where I was able to take over the shop. I wanted to start kind of clean, fresh, rebrand, and we became Good Hands Drum Shop in September 1st, 2022. So it's been 3+ years, and many more to come, I hope.
I wish you all the best. Congratulations
Thank you.
on pulling this together in
Yes, sir.
such a crazy place. I mean, I come to New York quite a bit, but once when you're out of the city for a while and you come back and you just see how many people are here and how expensive it is to be in this city, I give you all the kudos in the world to have a drum shop here. But there's also a ton of amazing musicians in here.
Incredible.
In this city, so I imagine a local community drum shop is welcomed by the drummers in this town.
It is. When I opened in 2022, I didn't know if it was ultimately important to carry on the Maxwell name, and again, for years, thanks to Steve for putting the trust in me to run the shop and all that. But when we changed to Good Hands Drum Shop, there was an immediate outpouring of support from everyone locally, as well as customer relationships that I've had in the past who were excited about the fact that there was going to be a continuation of a real brick and mortar drum shop in New York City, and not just a drum department.
Right.
And
that makes a big difference, doesn't it?
huge difference, not only for what you can do for customer service. You can be more specific about the things that you carry. You can talk to people, have long-term relationships. Staff turnover is very little compared to many drum departments, and that's a big part of keeping the essence of a true professional-oriented drum shop going.
Right.
So,
Well, and I mean, you segued right into the reason why I'm doing these things, is because promoting and showing the independent drum shop in the local communities and how important it is and how cool they are to have a place for drummers to go and talk to drummers who are really in the game.
yes.
And you get to hang, and you never know who's going to come in the door.
That's right.
You have lots of cool gear from new to old, and just it's a great vibe.
One of the most fun things that happen here, and it's because of New York. You can be hanging out. Someone might walk through the door that have a casual relationship now, but might have been a hero in my life past. And then someone else walks through the door, and it's like, oh, dang, I didn't know you were going to be here. Oh my! And then someone else walks through the door, and all of a sudden you've turned into this like drum celebrity hang, and it just happens naturally because we're in New York City, and it's one of the most beautiful things about being here, being part of it, being able to be a fly on the wall when the gang is all here.
You bet.
Unscripted hang, is fantastic, and that happens because of the location. Part of it is local folks. People, but also because people are on tour and want to come hang at the shop, see things, and our international customers too, who are here visiting in the summer, and other times they want to come and see a place that often doesn't have the same things that they're able to see locally or back home.
And that's sort of the folklore of New York City too, back in the heyday with 48th Street and all the stores that were there, and just the players that would come in and out. And Steve had a lot of great stories when
Yeah.
I interviewed him about his time in New York City and all of those things. So it's a very special place in that regard, isn't it?
I agree.
And you guys, this spot is pretty centrally located. You're not far from Times Square. You're just off of 7th Avenue, right? So you're not far from all the hustle and bustle that is New York City.
Yeah, we're on 30th Street near Madison Square Garden. 3 years ago, I signed up to take over the lease here for 2 years, and I knew that I could kind of take some time to figure things out here.
Right.
And after researching what it was going to require to move, to build out, what rents were really going to be like for the shop, and what we get out of this particular space that Steve originally had, we have a good deal here, all things considered.
That's great.
And one of the main things is that we're right next to Penn Station too. So our visitors from upstate and Pennsylvania and New Jersey, it's very easy to get here on train. We're half a block, 1 block from Penn Station.
Right.
So
That
it's
is
a,
convenient.
30th Street's got its issues. It's
Right.
like old school New York.
Right.
We'll call it vibrant.
Sure. No, I get it.
But transportation-wise, we are centrally located, which is good for everybody,
Awesome.
tourists and locals alike.
So what kind of brands do you see as your specialty here at Good Hands? I see all kinds of things in your store, from super high-end, vintage, and everything in between. So how can you answer that question for me?
Sure. We try to be selective with what we like.
Right.
I mean, that kind of starts, or is the focal point of what works for the shop. And we have some what we'd consider lower end or entry level things, but there are some great things at those price points that are better than others, and we try to cherry pick the best out of those groups.
Okay.
And then all the way up to the premium drum builders of Gretsch USA, Broadcaster, Tama Star, Craviato.
Sure.
Those brands we do well with. We also like them. We play them and we use them and we believe in them as instruments and have real relationships with the instrument in real world situations where I take any one of those 3 things out on a regular basis on my own gigs when those happen, and I'm always happy with how those perform, and I can then have a conversation with somebody about the real world experience of what does this USA custom snare drum sound like? How is it going to work in a jazz setting? How is it going to work in a rock setting? And it's like, if you want one drum to do one thing, want one drum to do a lot of things, that's my first choice.
Sure.
So, and then of course all of the buy, sell, trade, used, vintage things that we do here too. Early on in my interest in drumming, I was interested in vintage things almost immediately, and so I've tried, played, owned multiples of every brand from every era over the years, and it gave me an opportunity to play and listen and explore what all those sounds are like. And that's another reason why we have vintage Rogers and vintage Gretsch and Leedy and all these things, because they have a place in live music and as well as the recording studio that don't sound like anything that's new.
Right.
So,
yeah, and these drums last. I mean, it was amazing with technology of today and how they build hardware and making drum shells and stuff.
Yeah.
The drums that they built way back when were still totally usable as long as they're in decent shape.
That's right.
But they built them in a way that lasts for 100 years, and you could still make music with them.
Absolutely. Great examples include, of course, Black Beauties, the Ludwig drums that, or the drums that Ludwig made in the 1920s and 30s. Solid shell drums from Leedy and Slingerland are still basically made the same way when you're making a solid shell, with some refinement now and some attention to some details that make it a little more of a dynamic instrument. And one of the fun conversations I have on a regular basis is we have a glass case up front with an array of bass drum pedals ranging from the 1910s up to the 70s, and you look at some of the pedals that were made in the teens and the 20s, and you go, wow, well, there's a spring tension in a pedal, and there's some bearings, and they kind of had this figured out 100 years ago.
Right.
With, of course, now all of the bells and whistles and all of the adjustments, but the idea. And once they got past some of the leverages that were kind of funky and placement of the structure of the pedal, and they figured out that this goes like this, and these springs, it's best to put this spring over here. We've been doing the same, they've been doing it the same way for about 100 years.
Amazing.
So it is very cool.
So what draws you personally to the brand Gretsch, and how does that brand appeal to the customers here in your shop and like the drummers in New York City?
Sure. For me, I became very interested in the recorded history of jazz as a younger person, late high school, and the majority of the sounds that I was listening to, exploring, and the drummers that I was interested in were, for the most part, playing Gretsch drums.
Gotcha.
And it's hard not to associate the way that music feels and sounds and with that instrument, that Gretsch instrument. And Tony, Art Blakey, the seminal jazz recordings, so many of them are on Gretsch. And of course, the next generation of musicians who came after the progenitors of the music also became fascinated with that instrument. Sure. And there's a primary reason is that after listening and playing in a wide variety of musical situations, me personally, the Gretsch tone, and especially in smaller sizes, tends to be more successful in smaller groups. Mm-hmm. And I do attribute that to bearing edges and die cast, among other things, but it seems to have this sturdiness that as you tune drums up, they tend to not sound flat and they tend to not sound thin. They still have body at higher tunings, and that's what you want in smaller group settings. And of course, we get people asking for 80s Gretsch drums on a regular basis for studio usage because they're very successful there. Dry, quick, to the point, and very reliable too. There's a tone that this magic combination of edges, ply layup, die cast tubes, creates an instrument that sits in a mix and in live music. Manufacturers are trying to capture that same essence, but the real deal does the real thing.
Cool.
So, yeah.
And you do have some new Gretsch,
yes,
and lots of old Gretsch too.
Yes.
So how, in your opinion, what's the big difference? How does it compare old Gretsch to new Gretsch?
Sure. New Gretsch tends to be have a little more sub frequencies, I believe.
Okay.
Just a little more range in terms of the frequencies that you're getting. So a little deeper, a little more lower tones, and a little brighter on the top end also.
Okay.
Especially when you're talking about the difference between a 60s drum and a contemporary drum.
Sure.
70s drums tend to be a little drier than a contemporary drum too. Right. There is overall a the essence of USA especially is very linear from the late 50s through the drums that are being made today. You can hear the history in that current drum.
Sure.
And it's all there. It might be a little louder, or it might have a little more low end or a little more high end, but it's the behavior overall is about the same.
Right.
And of course the broadcaster is really faithful reproduction of a vintage drum. I don't think there is a better sounding, authentic tone in a Gretsch sound than the broadcaster if you're looking for a 50s or a 60s blended tone.
Sure.
Nothing else does it as well.
Well, Jess, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Sure.
I know your shop is open, you got customers coming in, so I don't want to keep you too long, but thank you for being a partner to Gretsch.
My pleasure.
And good luck with this store in the city. If any of you are ever in New York City, make sure you come by Good Hands Drum Shop. Visit with Jess and his team. They'll set you up with whatever you need. Got lots of great cymbal collection, older drums, percussion. There's all kinds of stuff in here. It's a beautiful store. Thank you again so much.
My pleasure.
And
thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Cheers, everybody.